Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And again, welcome, Alex, and I hope you feel fully disclaimed. And let's see what you've, again, crafted for us. Please take the screen whenever you're ready to come in. I know we went a little bit long today, but I thought it was, we did share quite a bit, even though there's much, much more to share and understand. But you're helping us so much with our understanding, and so we're very grateful of your presence and being here and delivering the teaching or the sharing of the knowledge.
Well, I'm very grateful for you to say that. We have been doing this for many, many years. And we have also been attending lectures for many, many years. And then the question always comes up, well, how can I explain to you the new technology in 35 seconds or less? And so we can't. And although we sometimes try, but we're going to have to go through a different form of learning. And one of the benefits of everyone who's stuck around through all these classes, and what makes this North American teaching so powerful, is that we're all teachers, and we're all going to be confronted with the same questions we were confronted with 6-7 years ago. Because as new knowledge seekers come forward, they're going to be asking the same questions that you asked. And the thing is, we don't have 7 years to go through it. So we try and condense it into all these teachings. And as such, we're going through further condensing. So welcome, everybody. And I hope you enjoy the trip. So please fasten your seatbelts. Here we go. This is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We're doing the Intermediate Inner Space Review. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is October 29th, 2023. This is the KAKT Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So as we stated, we're going through this review because we're starting to differentiate between the limited man-made laws and the unlimited universal role of man, and what it means to be an angel and what it means to transcend the various boundaries. So we find that in our donkey state, we are in the lowest energy state. And so the question becomes, is how do we elevate into the higher energy states, and what does it mean to be in a higher energy state? And this learning process is going to be quite challenging for all of us. So we're trying to follow the teachings in book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter. And then, of course, there's book number 2, The Structure of the Light, and book number 3, The Origin of the Universe. And many are wondering, how come book number 3 is not book number 1? Well, the two seem to go together round and round. And we like to think of things in straight lines. So when we get on that plasma highway, we just want to get on that straightaway and floor it. Well, we're going into a different type of highway. We're searching for outer space. And what is our embodiment of our little pie in the sky? I'll keep saying, what's a little pie in the sky? And, you know, how big is it? Well, I don't know. How big is large? How far away is far? How do we measure these things? And so we're going to be going on the next exciting episode on the 24th of November. We're dealing with the transmutation of light. And these dates are becoming very, very important. And we keep focusing on these dates because these are milestones. And, you know, one of the biggest milestones was back in 2020 when we had to learn about the cups of life and what it meant. And how do we progress from there? And how does it reflect our inner space? How does it reflect our emotional strength? Where does it come from? Where is that nebulous point in our core? And so we find that we have been progressing over 4 years with these classes, trying to bridge the gap between those who are new knowledge seekers and those who are more mature, and trying to help to cover these things through a teaching series, an understanding, knowing series, insight series. We did an earth space series, and now we're into the inner space series, and we're in the intermediate stage there. And if it sounds too familiar to you, you have to understand that in this review, we have been trying to catch up to the present day. And these classes were only done less than 10 months ago. And so we're already doing the review, and that's how fast we've been going through this review. So, yeah, we're really condensing these teachings, and they're dovetailing very nicely with the current events that are happening. And we have to understand how it all fits in. And frankly, it is really a challenge. So we talk about the three amigos: adaptation, the emotion of position, sequencing, choices, and dreamscape. And actually it's dreamscape part 2. So we're still searching for outer space because we seem to have found our little sentimental pie in the sky. It's a little tiny red dot in the bottom right-hand corner of man's universe. And it is a red dot because we are working in the lowest energy level on that red dot. And it's also a very small scheme when you compare it to the rest of the universe. And so somehow we have to link up with the source and with our soul. And since our soul is connected to the source, we have to try and figure out, how do we get on this little red dot? So what does it mean to be in a dimension? And so we keep talking about this relationship of 1 and 1 is more than 2. And then we have to understand that because it involves synergy. And the universe involves synergy and is rather dramatic in its presentation of synergy. So in mathematics, you know, you have your 2 factors and you add 1 and 1 together and you get an answer. But in the plasma science, you don't lose the first one and you don't lose the second one. And in fact, the first one and the second one aren't the same one. And the answer still maintains those first 2. So really, you don't get 2 to create 1. You get 2 to create more than 2. And so the third one becomes a feedback dimension. So you literally are maintaining all three of these dimensions. Well, where do we keep them? And since we're looking at these three dimensions, we're the observers. And, we can't really mathematically answer the question because pi is just this nebulous number that we can't pinpoint. So we have to fudge things. And so we're actually in the fourth dimension. And so really the question then becomes is, which dimension is which dimension? Or is that dimension the dimension we think it is? So that sounds like fumble speak. Well, in a way it is, because many tend to count the number of dimensions that there are. Well, as I said, how big is large? So what we have to do is look at the immediate reference point. And that reference point is either the near space versus the far space. And so wherever we are, we have to understand that there are three dimensions. And then there's a fourth dimension, which we are, because we're the observer dimension. But are we the only observer? Is there another guiding hand? Can we see this guiding hand? How can you see something if it's not visible? How can you see what is not there? These are tough questions, because we talk about uncharted skies. Well, sure, we'd like to map out everything. So as we go on the highway and we follow the leader, we hope that it's a moral leader. But it isn't just students following the teacher, because the teacher also becomes the student. And as we map things out, we have these landmarks. We have these telltale signs where you can hear things or see things. So we make positioning choices. Can we sort it out? Or can we get elevated? Because it's a rough road ahead. Well, we have to understand that when you cross a body of water, you don't have a chart. You don't have lines in the water. And the same thing happens in outer space. There are no lines to connect the dots, because we haven't chosen which dots to connect. So there has to be a guiding hand. And with that guiding hand, it allows us to tune in to these energies of the universe and turn on to the power. But we have to drop out of our resistance. We have to drop out of our arrogance and understand that even in the beginning, when we look at the universe, and it's uncharted. So, there were no planets, there was no atmosphere, there's no water. So, in our terms of our reference, the sun had to be here first. Because in order for you to be anywhere has to be there first, right? And so where is that anywhere? Well, then we became Mercury, and we had to understand that this is a process that began. It's called the creation of the universe. It exists from energy. And this is what's discussed in the Universal Order of Creation of Matters in book number 1. The universe exists from energy, and energy is always in motion. So energy is always positive. So what does it mean to be positive or negative? It means that you have a charge and that you're in motion. And if you're in motion, where are you going? So you have to understand that all things are working in combination. But if you can't see where you're going, or if you don't know where you've come from, how can you link up these points of reference? So this is the battle that we're all facing, because the plasma is already interacting and it understands all things in combination. So we understand the infinity loop. What goes around comes around, and there's always this magnetical pushing and this gravitational pulling. And so it creates a balanced condition, which we call a Magrath condition. But clearly it's not in balance, because if it was in balance, it would be completely clear. You wouldn't even see it. So we see this because based on this principle, the other planets followed one by one. And, then came Venus, and then came Earth, our favorite place, and then came Mars, and there's more came. They said there was Tiamat, and then legends say we blew it up, which was a lot of fun. So I hope someone enjoyed that. But, the thing is, we still haven't answered where outer space is. And so outer space is actually this reality dimension that we're looking for. It's not a place. It's a method of energy transfer. We call energy in motion. And this is the thing. In order for us to understand how this energy is transmitted and how we transition and then come to this point of existence via this transmutation. So we are converging this energy and crossing over, going from this launch point to this landing point from some space in between. So our position in terms of physical reality is actually in between two fields of plasmatic reality. One plasmatic reality plus another plasmatic reality gives us more than just our physical reality, because it's not just you, is it? There's more than you. So what's most important is you and your man space. But within your man space, there's more than you as well, because we have two souls, we have two emotions, and we have two physicalities. Oh yeah, where's the other physicality? Well, remember that we are physical within the earth space. So we have to take that into account. So when we're looking at this vanishing point to cross over from that transparency point where we don't see the guiding hand to this manifestation point, wherever that is, we have to have a reference. And so this is the point. Every energy state is a plasma state. So a plasma is a kind of energy state, and some are different insofar as, are they visible? Are they tangible? So most of the plasma states are non-visible, non-tangible. The only one that is visible is the physical state. And so that's our point of view right now, isn't it? And that's why we spend so much time understanding our earth space. But what we're looking for is to find our inner space, that non-tangible space. And then that'll be the key to the gateway to the outer space. This is what life is all about, and that's important. And if important is not important, well, then, nothing is important. So we say that, things are measured by the speed of rotation. And when we say they measure, it's a way of just saying that energy states can increase or decrease by at least an order of magnitude. But energy can only be held in a field. So this field is what manifests from rotation. And so the speed of the rotation affects the field strength. So the stronger the field, the more energy it can hold. And since the energy is always in motion, then we have to give it a path. And so that plasma highway is not a straight line, it's a rotating field. And as such, we have an interaction with other fields. And so the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. So not only is it the speed of rotation, but there's the speed of relation. So the strength accommodates for by field relations. And so these energy states can transcend multiple energy states. And the Earth space is a kind of energy state. But it is still bound to the ethos of the universe. So where is the problem? The problem is understanding the balance between the magnetical gravitational field forces and how they work together. So when we look at the scientific community and we see that it has its own point of view and the spiritual community has its own point of view, well, each point of view is only half the equation. It's only one. So you have to add the other one. And then it's not one as opposed to the other one, it's a one in plus one, and you get that synergy, which is more than two. And this is where the plasma science adds to the knowledge. But at what rate of change? Because that becomes the question here. Because when we're looking at these field relationships, we're not in a spider versus fly relationship. We're not in an adversarial versus a coexistence relationship. We are in an earth space relationship and an inner space relationship. And the thing is, our inner space is part of our man space. But the earth space also has an inner space. So is that confusing? No. It's fundamental. This is where the science meets the soul of man for peace, because the earth space is a peaceful place. The question is, can man space calm the inner space for peace? Right? Because we put limitations on our soul. And so this becomes our emotion of presence. And it's related to our past and to our future. And some people say, well, you know, it's because of our past that determines our future. Well, today is the present. And today will be the past tomorrow. So if you change the presence of today, then you will have changed the past. And each one of us is independent, and each one of us is variable. But each one of us is in this environment between the feeding energy of the sun and the feedback energy of the earth. And so where are we? Which dimension are we in? Are we in the feeding dimension or are we in the feedback dimension? Yes, we are in both. And the reason for that is because we are the product of those two dimensions. We are in the inertia dimension. And in order to make that dimension function properly, we have to have this trust. And how do we rate this trust? Well, hello, you were born. So, you know, if you want to rate your trust, how can you depend on someone who's double crossing you all the time? And then if you understand the plasma science, that double cross is the cross that you bear, and that becomes your eternal burden. And so this is where we ponder at the gates of hell, because we don't understand how energy moves. It's positive and negative, and the negative gives and the positive takes. but what does it give to? And what does it take from? And if you just give and take from yourself, it's like a dog chasing your tail. So we have to understand that energy can be flowing or it can be binding. And that's just the fundamental part of principal interaction, that energy in motion is a two-way street. So in order to maintain a Maggrav condition, there has to be a binding of energy. But that binding of energy has to have an interaction with some other binding energy. So that binding of one plus the binding of another creates the flowing in between, which is the interaction of the inertia, which we call synergy. And it's more than the sum of the two. So yes, we need to have this energy binding. That's what creates our emotion of position. But do we have to take that at the expense of others? Because then we're drawing, if we're in our physicality at the weakest energy level, and we draw that energy from another who is in their weakest level, then we are clearly drawing energy from the lowest energy source. And the only reason we do that is if there's some kind of disconnect, because then our connection is only halfway. We're only connected to the soul of the body and its physicality, and disconnected from the soul of the man and its connection to the universe. And so we say, well, we're only going to take into account what we can see. But the soul can see so much more. So energy needs to flow. And so if we are going to be self-serving, and if we do that at the enhancement of others, then that too becomes self-serving. And how does that work? So one of the reasons we studied the business school of bankruptcy is to understand that if our neighbor is impoverished, then they can't pay for the goods and services that we provide. So we need healthy customers. We need wealthy customers so they can contribute to our health and our wealth. That's how things work together. So why are we talking about the three amigos? Well, in North America here, we are intimately intertwined on the North American continent between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. But actually, we're part of another set of three amigos. We're in the North American one, but there's a Central America and there's a South America. So these are the three American amigos. And then, of course, in our man space, we talk about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Well, in our physicality, we talk about our mental state, emotional state, and our physical state. So there's clearly a difference between our earthbound strength, where we see the physicality and how it's important, and we say, well, we have a small head and a big body. But if we understand the plasma field strength, the soul of man is much stronger than the soul of the body. But either way, they still work together, because what we're doing is we're communicating from that dynamic transfer state to that physical destination state and back. So these three amigos, the soul of the man, the soul of the body, have a physical body. And where is this physical body? Well, it's in our man space, but where's this man space? Well, it's in the earth space. Well, where's this earth space? Well, it's in the sun space. So we have to take into consideration each and every one of those places. So when we look at this relationship, we talk about the earth and the sun. on the right. And when we talk about the origins of the universe, and we see our sister universe along with our universe and the relationship thereof. And then we look at our soul and the relationships thereof, and we see this relationship pattern. So it now is showing how all of these fields are operating. And the thing is that these fields are overlapping, right? Because when we look into space, we see this Mars space, and we have our Earth space, and then we have man space on this Earth space. But of course, we're sharing that with the vertical people space and the horizontal people space. But then you add this moon space, and then we have these satellites and these other spaceships. And all of these are overlapping into the solar system space. And the dominant space in the solar system space is the sun. So each of these spaces is 3 dimensions. Right? So if we want to talk about theory, well, we have to put forward a theory, a conceptual theory. And then we have to prove this concept. Well, in order to prove it, we have to bracket that relationship. So some of us want to see if the moral virtue aligns with the actual realization. Now, which one do you take into account? So what we're talking about is the competition between sincerity versus fakery. Which one do you want to take into account? And so you could say that one is substantial and one is superficial. And which one do you want to take into account? Well, if you're going to bracket the relationship in order to understand if it's substantial or if it's superficial, you have to have the relationship of both. So within the realm of substantial versus superficial, you can determine where exactly it is. Well, what is the point? The point is that when you're stuck in between, you can't tell sometimes. You don't know if it's sincere or if it's fake. I hear your words, but I'm not entirely convinced that you're telling me the truth. Well, why are you having this hesitation? Well, I don't know. It's a gut feeling. Well, what do you mean by a gut feeling? So you can get lost in this nebulous in-betweenness. But if you go to the extreme, let's say, if you were sincere, totally sincere, with no fakery, would you not emit love? And if I were listening to you, wouldn't I feel that love? And if we go to the other extreme, and if you were total fake, no sincerity whatsoever, wouldn't you make some claims that were totally outlandish, totally non-caring as to whether or not I believed it? And then if I felt that, and I say, you're a bald-faced liar. No hesitation. So in order for you to understand, you have to understand the extremes. And then wherever in that midpoint is, that now becomes an acquired skill. So yeah, I can hear your words, but I'm not listening to what your mouth is flapping. I'm listening to what your soul is saying. Okay. And so we are constantly positioning our man space accordingly. And we have done that, haven't we? We have done that because we've come to Earth. Look at all the choices we had. We could have gone to any of these places, but no, we had to come to Earth. And here, and Earth is like right here. It's not there. It's between Venus and Mars. That's where it is. So this is the point. So we communicated with the soul of the Earth, and the Earth has its own three amigos, including the soul of the Earth body and the physical Earth body. So how did those three amigos work? Because all you got was the Earth space. But the Earth space had an inner space. And so the extreme is this inner space. And the extreme is the Earth space. So this is it. We're still looking for this outer space. It's this in-between space, somewhere space, wherever that space is. And when we came to this Earth space, we didn't just come anywhere. We came between the magnetical peace dome, right, and the gravitational magma of the Earth space. And we landed on the biosphere range, on the crust of the Earth. And so we are in that in-between space, aren't we, of the Earth space. And that's pretty specific, because wherever you are, there you are. But the place I am is not the place that you're at. So how come that's different? So this is the thing. Our soul and our soul of the body and our physical body is operating on this rotating Earth. But the Earth doesn't walk. But we walk, but we don't rotate. And so this was always the question, which way does the sun rotate? Well, what's your point of view? And this is the thing. So we have to figure out our manifestation point, because we have to determine who we are and how we got here. And we have to determine where is the symbiosis. And if we look at on a practical state, we could talk about garbage and profit. Or if we look at on the plasma state, we can talk about PM-TIC rays, X-rays, and gamma rays. So each of those, have a core component. One is magnetical and one is gravitational. And these are the parts of the rays. So the PM-TICs are your plasma rays, and your atom are your gravitational rays. So what's the neutron? If the neutron is at the core component, so the neutron is like the book number 1. The universal order of creation of matter. And then when you look at the ray launch point as the nuclear decay of the neutron, you find that you have an atom, which consists of an electron and a proton marriage. And so when you measure the mass of the atom, and then you measure the mass of the neutron, they're not the same. With respect to that neutron, the atom is less with respect to the atom, the neutron is more. Well, where did that difference go? So that was the release of the PM ticks. So then if we add the mass of the PM ticks, then we get a balance. But not really. Because when it's in balance, we don't see anything. So what's going on the side of the atom? Well, we see that the plasma of the electron is dictated by the amount of the magnetic fields which are transferred from the large twin plasma of the proton. And so there's a relationship there as well. And they're not in balance, but they are in balance. So what is wrong here? What is wrong is that when we're looking at the core component, it's not the electron, but it's the ray. And so the ray in a magnetical context is like the neutron, except that's in its gravitational context. So the ray is going somewhere and the neutron is the destination. And from the neutron, we can create the ray, and so it goes. So this is how we created this nanostate, because we created this monatomic atom. And by putting all of these together in a pattern, and we had one layer and another layer, and we created this synergy. Superconductor at room temperature. But what is the difference between the biology and the physics? Well, when you have more than 3 amigos in a chain, that becomes a polymer. But when you have biology, those 3 fold over and create a protein. So this protein is none of these 3 dimensions. The protein is the folding over of the 3. So you have the synergy created by the 3, where 1 plus 1 is more than 2, but the product is none of those 3. It's no longer an amino acid, it is now a protein. So whether those 3 fold over into a protein, or whether those 3 add a 4th and become a polymer, the threshold is 3. So that's our biology, our physiology. And when you look at the earth, the soul of the earth and the soul of the earth body and the physical earth body, that's your 3. But within that earth body, you have your peace dome, your core, and your biosphere. So this is the point. There's the soul of the earth body, the peace dome. There's the biosphere. This is our home. And it's also the home of the vertical people and the horizontal people. It holds our atmosphere. It holds the water and the land. And then in the core is the soul of the earth. And so when we look at the ray launch dimensions, we have to see the relationship of the base of the star formation, which is 3, and then the 4th, which is none of those 3, but is a byproduct of those 3. And it completes the Keshe model of nuclear decay of the neutron. And so when we look at the soul of man and the soul of the body and this physical body that we have in our man space, we find that Well, we have also three amigos. We've got the brain, we've got the heart, and then we have the reproduction system. So the home of the soul of the man is in the brain, isn't it? And then the home of the soul of the body is in the heart, isn't it? Well, the home of the reproduction for our generations and our regenerations is in our loins. And so all of these are cells which are facilitating the creation through this transmutation process. So when you look at the soul of the cells, they do the same thing. So we've got the interaction of the RNA and the DNA, and this creates undifferentiated cells. But then these undifferentiated cells become differentiated. And furthermore, some are healthy cells and some are unhealthy cells. But these unhealthy cells are replaced by healthy cells. And so when the healthy cells do the job and complete the job, they stop the cell production. But unhealthy cells cannot stop the cell production. So something has caused a problem there. And we call that communication. So we don't see the communication. That's the hidden guiding hand, right? The part that we don't understand. But the cells seem to understand it because they have this intracellular communication. So if we're not communicating properly, then we have this disruption. And that disruption is called cancer. So that disruption can be cell because the energy has to come from inside one, and it has these cells. So you have this intercellular communication. So any one of these points can be disrupted. So this is, you could have a disruption of one, or disruption of another one, or a disruption of the sum of the two. And in fact, you'd have disruption of all three. And then we call that death. And so now we understand how this communication works. And we see that in order for you to understand where you are, you have to have a relationship with your neighbor. So the kidney has a cell and the lungs have a cell. But how do the lungs know that they're lungs? Well, they don't, but they do know that they're not kidneys. And the kidneys know that they're not lungs. So this is how we have to communicate. So now we understand how this inner space radio broadcast channel is working. So we not only transmit where we are and what we're doing, but we can also transmit defects. And so the medium for communication is this emotional connection. And so if we have emotional defects, then this is what we transmit. So if the earth doesn't walk and we don't rotate, how come we're working together? Because what we're doing is we're seeking gravitational stability. This is the key point. So we resolve the anomaly. How do we operate? Well, we have cells and they take into account the neighbors. And so there is a core and there that is gravitational, and then there is a magnetical field, just like on the Earth space. So we resolved that anomaly. Now we understand that man space has three plasma amigos: the soul of the man, the soul of the body, and the physical body. But you know, so does the Earth space. And this is the point. So does everything about our planet. Because we're one nation, one planet, and one race. And we've been promoting that for 297 weeks in a row. And these three amigos are looking for that fourth dimension, which we call world peace, because that is the product of the attraction and repulsion sources, which we call gravitational and magnetical field forces of convergence and divergence, and the two work together because each one of us is an independent variable, and each one of us is working in an interdependent universe. So we can always reach one. And the connection is this emotional transformation that allows us to teach one, to be one nation, one planet, one universe. And then we have to look at how do we adapt to this whole thing. So we have to understand that there has to be an emotional energy manifestation. So where you get this feedback from another feedback, that's your neighbor, but then there's another neighbor on the other side, that's another feedback. So one feedback and another feedback gives you your feedback. This is your binding and your launch point. And so when we look at this on a cellular level, we see the home of the soul of the cells is in the center of the cell. And it's the emotion that can transcend the different levels. So where is this home of the emotion? So the rate of change becomes important. So we've all heard the story of the camel and how it just stuck its head in the tent, or the story of the boiling water and the frog, where we slowly raise the temperature of the water for the poor froggy, and the drip method, right? Let's just drop at a time. No one's going to notice. Well, we had a great flood and everybody noticed. So then the question becomes, do you adapt with a paddle or do you adapt with an umbrella? Or do we just break the chain, right? Because that chain is limiting us if we don't understand that we are not the stacker. We interact with the stacker. But there's another dimension. And for the longest time, it was hard to talk about the virus, non-tangible, non-physical, the independent variable. And so when we look at the cup of the universe, it's not like a stacker. We don't see the connections. But do we understand the positioning and the guiding hand that forced that positioning? So when we created the Gans and the cups of life, did we see the connections? Well, we've seen the connections between the various parts of the cups of life, but we didn't see how suddenly we created copper Gans and carbon Gans and zinc Gans. Where did that come from? Where was the guiding hand there? And then we look at our RNA and how does that adapt? How does it adapt the universal energies to our Earth space? And our Earth space has many different types of field strengths. So how does our DNA adapt to these things? So one of the ways that we can do is through gene modification, right? But is that disruption or is it alteration? And let's face it, is it enduring or is it reversible? Well, these are all very good questions. So, when we're looking for gravitational stability, we have to say, well, which way does anything rotate? because if it's stable, in which direction is it stable? And so we find that we're all different. But what we've defined at this point is the purpose of growth. Because the growth is what contributes to our stability. And our stability defines our position, the emotion of position, which is the adaptation of the dimensions, which we call the three amigos, and how they connect to facilitate the adaptation. The connections to what? And what are the links? These emotions. So we all understand plasma emotion, don't we? Because if you have an idea, you're not left with a hole in your head. Or if you say, I have a wish, or I demonstrate courage, or I give you my love, I don't end up with a hole in my heart. Because these are co-emissions. These are all plasma emotions. So when we look at the cup of the universe, and we say that represents our brain, but we find we have a left side brain, which controls the right side of the body, and then we have a right side brain, which controls the left side of the body. And there's a crossover. So, well, let's think about these crossovers, because how does that all work? You know, we have a bicameral mind, we have two lungs, most organs come in pairs, or pairs relations, like the heart, the liver, they have similar functions, but for two different sides. But then we have, oh, wait a second, there's different types of genitalia. So where's the emotion of presence? Is it the home of the emotion between the male and the female? Well, there's a male emotion, right? You say, well, it's a physical gut, right? But then there's the female emotion, which is intuitive. Well, we don't count that, right? And then, of course, there's this marriage emotion where the two want to work together. But, you know, the male brain is dominant. Whereas the female brain is submissive. But there's a male brain that is pusillanimous, and there's a female brain that is a dominatrix. So when you look at this marriage brain, what is the context? It's a family. It's a partnership. And so the male has a brave heart and the female has a faint heart. But what about the marriage heart? Well, the marriage heart is very strong because blood is thicker than water. So the male body is strong and competitive, whereas the female body is weak and jealous. So what happens to the marriage body? You know, you have mommy and daddy. So who wears the pants in that family? You've got the male courageous pants, or is it the female courageous dress? Or how about the marriage pants, where there's cooperation, not competition? And so when you look at the family, what constitutes a family is familiarity. And unfortunately, that respect of the family turns to contempt and can cause a family breakup. And then you have other types of family. You have gang families, and then you have the global family. And so which family is your family? Okay. So I think that's determined by your emotion, isn't it? So these things can all be points of conflict where the man-made law is competing against the universal law. And so it can boil down to a tug of war between the physical and emotional positioning. So that's your emotion of position. Well, if we can elevate this emotion of position, then we find that we're all part of this humanity family. But we have to understand that there's a sequencing, there's a graduation, and that sequencing isn't governed by the limitations of nuclear science, but in fact transcends it because it involves the ethos of the universe. So to understand creation, you have to understand morality, compassion, and courage. And when we say courage, we mean courage. It takes a lot of courage to be part of creation. And so we have announced at this time that we are planning plasma flight tests to the moon. And so this human race is in another race, a race to the moon. And so, which moon? Because you see, Jupiter has a total of 92 moons, and Saturn is in second place. They only have 83, but Uranus has 27, and Neptune has 14. Mars has 2. Oh, we only have 1. Venus and Mercury have none. So much for that, eh? So, but there's a sequence, and as you notice, and so that sequence follows our position. And so these are the kind of the emotions that we've taken into account. The emotions of man, the emotions of the physicality of man. This represents the emotion of our presence. But our presence also reflects the emotion of the position. Or does the position reflect the emotion of our presence? Because when we look at these moons, some are rotating in a prograde way and some are rotating in a retrograde way, and some only wobble and don't rotate. You know, our moon is a wobbler, and the rotation direction is in relation to its planet. So all of the planets are rotating around the sun in the same direction, but these moons are all seem to be choosing their own kind of rotation. So what's going on? Is it representative of what's going on inside the molecule? So what is a molecule? Well, it's a group of 2 or more atoms held together by chemical bonds, right? We've all seen those chemical bonds, like when we produce the GANs. So a compound is a substance when it's formed by 2 or more different types of elements. Oh, there you go. 1 plus 1, and they're united chemically in a fixed proportion. But all molecules are not compounds. All compounds are molecules. So water is a compound because it's made up of water molecules. But there's no such thing as a water atom. So water molecules are made up of hydrogen and oxygen atoms in a definite proportion of 2 hydrogens for 1 oxygen. But we know that oxygen comes in pairs. So there are sequences. And so we have these filters to create these sequences. So how do we know if we're out of sequence? Well, that's what the filter does. It's how you tell the difference, right? So where's this filter that says if you scratch your nose that you wouldn't grow more toes? so we find that sequence providers can also undo the damage. What does that mean? That means if it's out of sequence, it could be put back into sequence. This is a key point. Because, going back to Herman Weyl, there's no such thing as one and the same energy which constitutes a charge at two adjacent increments of time. So, there's always a flow and there's always a connection. And so in order for there to be a flow, there has to be a binding force. And from that binding force, it has to go to another binding force. The nature of that binding force imbues a sequence. And if there is a disruptor to take it out of sequence, then the product of that interaction is also out of sequence. But as we said, the one plus the other one, which is not necessarily the same one, still remains. So despite the fact that it's out of sequence, the pattern to create the sequence still remains. Hello. What? Well, so when we look at the amino acids, well, there they are. Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. We never talked about sulfur. But there are 20 amino acids involved in the metabolic process of all living things. 20 of them. And they're all amino acids, but they're all different. So what is metabolism? Well, it comes from two words, meta and bol. Bol is to cast and meta is out. So now we know that, if you're in meta, you're out of your mind. You know your place based on class or caste. And so class is based on a social rank. And this is what we're doing. We're striving for a classless society. Maybe we're already classless. As I said in the past, you can't insult the ignorant. But the organs of the body, they operate on a different set of rules. The brain and the heart are functions of plasmatic manifestation. And the other parts, the liver, the Leydig system, the autonomous nervous system, the cells, and the electron transfer system, these are all physical manifestations. And so these all work together. And so when we look at these amino acids and we see cytosine, thymine, adenine, and guanine, they have a sequencing. And they go through this Krebs cycle. Oh, there's the three amigos, cytochrome A, B, and C. And they create this ATP, another three amigos. And so if we relate that to the plasma science of transition, transmission, and transmutation, well, we find that each cycle creates 12 ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And so a healthy cell can take from one glucose molecule, one molecule, imagine that, and create 36 ATP. I like that business plan. That's a good business plan. But if we have a disruption in that sequencing and it falls in the cytochrome B, which is the in-between level, we suddenly have this deficiency. We drop down from 12 ATP production to 2 ATP production. The accountant would not be very happy with that business plan. But the problem is we only get 26 ATP, and that becomes an unhealthy cell. And that unhealthy cell is not functioning properly. So when we look at the DNA, it's organized on 64 triple. There's that 3 again, codons of the DNA. So there's 64. sets, not one. And the RNA has a similar organization, 64 sets of 3. And when you look at the I Ching, and you see that it has 64 different sets of 3. And then we have the audacities to say that our ancestors were stupid. And when we look at the artwork in the Atlantean rugs, we see the design of the codons of the DNA and the RNA. And they put it in the artwork. So these stupid Atlanteans knew this before the smart Westerners, us. Unfortunately, there's something else, and that is the hormones in our body. These are sequence of providers. And what is the purpose of these providers? Well, it's either to enhance something or to diminish something. And so there are also sequence disruptors. And these can be done with adrenaline and cortisol. So what you're getting is a feedback from your mRNA, which facilitates the adaptation of the DNA. But what we've done, we've created a science of psychiatry, psychology, and physiology, and we've introduced pharmacology. Sequence disruptor. So one hormone begets another. That's the whole purpose. So hormones themselves grow in sequence. The sequence becomes a pattern, and the pattern becomes a communication sequence. Hello. So we see these energy paths of the central nervous system, the electron transfer system, the interstitial network. This is the hormonal network, the guiding hand, the unseen guiding hand. And there are about 64 that are named. But then if we introduce steroids and other hormones, and we find that, you know, there are fundamental hormones that we concentrate on. So there's DHEA, dopamine, adrenaline, cortisol, estrogen, and testosterone. And so we have mitigators, some of which are enhancers, and they affect sympathetic system, which is the fight or flight syndrome that we have, or the sympathetic system, what they say, rest or digest. And then we have suppressors, cortisol to suppress pain, and dopamine to enhance sleep. But fundamentally, the difference is between the allowable and the unallowable aspects. And then we have dehydroepiandrosterone. Dehydroepiandrosterone, the mother of all hormones. And they say the older we get, the less we produce. And they say the same thing about mother's milk, don't they? They say mother's milk has this limited amount of water-soluble calcium. And so the mother's milk is suitable for babies. So when we see a less, we have to ask ourselves, is it less of excess? Meaning, do we have what we need? Have we achieved the point in our growth where we have what we need? Do we need more DHEA? Or do we get what we need? Or have we develop the skills to get what we need so that our cellular communication is functioning properly? And do babies need more water-soluble calcium? And children and adults get what they need or have developed the skills to get what they need? So when we look at these elements that we have here, we have to ask ourselves, well, wait a second. How can we, from this basic atomic structure, get all these different things? And so these are all the elements on our Earth space. And our Earth space is our place. And so we find that all of these elements are part of our man space as well. And so these elements have different positions. So there's a whole host of what we call transition metals. And then when we look at the periodic table of elements, and if we take the left two columns and swing them over to the right, and in those two columns, we have magnesium and calcium, two very important elements. And why do we swing them over to the right? Well, so we have our Earth space GANS details, right? We have the amino acids, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. But we see that there's hydrogen can be here, or it can be there, you know, it's someplace. And then we see that carbon and silicon are in the same family, but the carbon has to do with man space and the silicon has to do with Earth space. And the Earth space has copper, zinc, and iron. And, you know, the copper for us has to do with the muscles, the zinc has to do with emotion, and the iron has to do with the blood. And then we have the medium, the sodium, and the potassium, the magnesium, and the calcium. And then we have this inert air gas, inert. We call it a noble gas or an inert. So the term chemically inert is used to describe a substance that is not chemically reactive. How can it be inactive? What happened? That was created and then it just stopped? Is that possible? I mean, seriously. So when we look at the inert gases, we have to understand that they're gravitationally stable. Okay. It is from this gravitationally stable set of inert gases that we can create physical molecules, which are elements, chemical molecules, which are products, or plasma molecules, such as GANS. So we find that these inert gases can be transmutation sequence providers. And another inert gas is a plasmagen. So these are plasma gas molecules. And since it's a two-way street, then here we can choose natural creation or natural decay. So in review, energy sequencing, the way we understand it in science, we see that the magnetic and electric is the lowest energy. Then there's electromagnetic, and then the atomic, and then the nuclear. Well, the plasma supersedes the nuclear. And then, of course, there's the soul of the man and the soul of the body. So these are all at a different energy state. So we talk about choices. So when we look at our man space and we see the three amigos, and we see, well, we have a soul and the soul of the body, and we have an emotional connection. do we have a choice in what we connect to? Well, yeah, we've already chosen Earth's target, right? And that's the range between the moon space and the core of the Earth space, right? So our target practice was very precise. We hit that biosphere range on this Earth space in between the Peace Dome and the core. But interestingly enough, when we introduce X-rays and we want to see the gravitational field effect, we see another materialization effect. And isn't this strange? Because we had the physicality of our skin, but then within our skin, we see the physical effect of something else. And we use these X-rays to try and see a visible disease effect. So until the visible disease effect it becomes visible, we really can't see it, can we? So the truth is that this disease effect has to materialize in order for us to see it, because everything else that's within us, we can't see. So we cannot see the cells. We can only see the manifestation of the cells. And the only time we can see that is on our skin, or if we break the skin, or if we see the X-ray and we can see the bones, or we can see cancerous tissue. So we can't see the communication. We can only see the disruption. And then we have to decide, is it stable? And so the bone structure gives us stability, but the cancer is a disruption of stability. And in this communication process, we could see both, because this is the thing about physicality. So we interpret this as being how we conquer outer space, right? We're seeking gravitational stability. Well, are you the lord of your castle? And if you are you the master or are you the slave? Is that how we conquer outer space? Is that what we're trying to do? But how can you conquer outer space? Well, the only thing that we can see is all of these launch points, these landing points, and the in-between space of these landing points from different planets and different moons and the sun. And we never find this outer space. So we have to depend on this non-physical, emotional stability. And in that process, we still do this crossover. And then with this crossover, now we're trying to get this balance between the male and the female, right? So that we can establish our motion of position. And so let's go back to this marriage. And we find that this marriage has now progressed, where 1 and 1 is more than 2, right? Because the man and the woman have a child. You still have the man and the woman. So now it's 3, but it's still a family. So with 2, it was a family. With 3, it's still a family. And then maybe a 4th, it's still a family, right? And we have this emotional connection, but maybe we have this contest between attention. But, we have to understand that the man has parents and the woman has parents, so they're now grandparents, and they have an emotional, biological connection. Okay, well, everything's working out pretty good here. But, along the way, there's a divorce. All right. And so now you get the opportunity to have a remarriage. Right. So now you have a new family. So how does that relate to the other family? Because now you've introduced another physical family. Okay. But, how does this work out? Because if the new family has another child, then now you have a third sibling. It's extending the emotional family, isn't it? So can you say that this emotional family is the physical family? Well, I guess you could, but is that the way it works? Because, in terms of family connections, we have a biological connection and then we have a legal connection. And emotionally, we have a biological connection, but maybe we have a step parent connection. So that would become a connection of position. And then, we have the maternal and the paternal. That's another connection. So if the father changes the mother, then that connection would be paternal. But if the mother changes the father, then that would be a maternal. So which connection is it? So we find that the maternal is a universal feeding, and the paternal is a donor feedback. So the maternal is the RNA magnetical, and the paternal is the DNA gravitational. These are the genetic connections. But does that determine the choice of family choices? Because now you're talking about adopted families and universal families. And so it becomes a point of conflict between this man-made law and this universal law. It's a tug of war between the physical and emotional positioning. And it could include racial prejudice, can't it? So we have this earthbound prejudice versus interplanetary prejudice, right? Is the interplanetary prejudice the same as universal prejudice? Well, why are we asking these questions? Well, because we're having trouble with earthbound prejudice. If one is earthbound white and one is earthbound black, and with that we have prejudice, what happens if one earthbound and the other one is Mars-bound? How does the prejudice work there? Would the Mars-bound have prejudice against the black earthbound or the white earthbound? Or what if on the Mars-bound we have orange and green? Would we have prejudice that way? Would that affect our emotional position? So, this is a problem that we're going to grips with. And so there was a famous movie, you know, with the Guess Who's Coming for Dinner. Well, in February, on 19th of February, we had to guess again. Are we talking about the man and the woman and the child being at dinner with the Creator? Or are we talking about the humanity family coming to dinner with the universal family? Either way, what we're talking about is food security. And that is part, the launch point for our Dreamscape Part 2, to understand how we function with our left brain and our right brain and understand the coordination of the brain and the heart, the coordination of the head and the body, and the coordination of the soul of the man, the soul of the body. But this is all anchored in the GPS of the plasma of the soul. And so the bandwidth of the field strength of the soul is where we anchor in, and it's anchored in our blood. But which soul? The soul of the man, the soul of the body, or the soul of the cells? Which one is doing the anchoring? And so when we look at how we progress from the time we're born, we find that the heart materializes before the brain. What? So now we understand memory a little bit different, because we can't remember before we were born, right? We weren't born yet. And we can't remember after birth, although we were born. Sometimes we can't even remember yesterday, or sometimes we're concussed, and so we have our comatose condition, or we get too old and we have Alzheimer's, can't remember that. And then, of course, most of us can't remember our dreams. These are all kinds of amnesia. And so this becomes a commentary on brain function, doesn't it? So how do we make this dream connection? So the whole purpose of the sleep is to get rest. So who leaves and who stays behind? And who minds the fort? Who's minding the brain? And so we see the relationship between the three amigos, the soul of the man, the soul of the body, and the physical body. And don't forget those other guys, the souls of the cells. And we try and make this connection, but remember that we're also staying connected to our environment. And so we see that the humanity family is connected to the peace dome. And we see that there's a limit to what we can see. But there's this gap. As we go from ships to airplanes to warplanes to satellites, there's this gap in this magnetical field around the Earth. And so, where do you go? And why and how? Well, the key point is that it is a safety dream. You dream in safety. It's not a scary place. The question is, can you remember? Well, this is what we're working on. This dream communication. right? Because this is an in-person meeting. It's like a phone meeting, but it's a dream meeting. You choose who you meet with. You connect with the cosmic compact units. And this connection is the universal pathway, which will never lead you astray. So this becomes a dynamic plasma interaction sequence. The inner space spectrum feeding radiance, and then the inner space spectrum feedback radiance. So we understand that the magnetical output becomes the gravitational input, but how does that change? And how does that affect your soul spectrum? So we find that the origin comes from this inner space or point within this inner space field. And it may have a physical manifestation, but it always has a plasmatic manifestation. And as such, it has to react with something else. So the whole point of this discussion is that we have to take into account the peace dome. We have to take into account that our environment, because without that environment, we can't be here. Okay, so this is the basic thing. This is the biosphere of peace, because this is the position of safety. This emotion of position is the vertical people's dreamscape. And so the majority seek and will answer the call of freedom and emancipation. The universe is emotionally normal. The earth seeks freedom and emancipation, and man can choose now his existential adaptation to the harvest of the plasma emotional energy of the plasma universe. So when we're pursuing our happiness, we find that our launch field failure is determined by the emotion of position and its failure in our choice. Fortunately, our souls have already made the choice. 100% of the souls born prefer the bountifulness of Earth space as opposed to Mars space. We have never launched a rocket into outer space because there is no place on the emotion of position map. What it is the dynamic plasma interaction between one maggrav and another maggrav, and the susceptibility of exchanging energy, giving and taking. And the crossover is the reality dimension. And we're none of those dimensions because we're the observer dimension. So we are the product of 1 + 1 is more than 2. So this sequencing then has to take into account more. The soul sequencing has to take into account the soul of the earth and the soul of the sun. Well, wait a second. The soul of the earth has to take into account the soul of the sun and the soul of the solar system first, right? That has a priority. Then the soul of the earth body can interact with the soul of the earth and the soul of the sun, right? That's how you get the inertia of the soul of the earth body. Then once you have the soul of the earth body, okay, well now we can attract the soul of the earth man body, because we already have the soul of the man. Now we have the soul of the earth body. Okay, so now we see the sequence. Well, we can't manifest until the earth manifests. So the physicality of the earth has to interact with the soul of the earth body and the soul of the sun body first. And then the soul of the man and his body can interact with the soul of the body and the soul of the earth body. manifest our physicality of the body, which we call materialization. So the default pathway manifestation is for gravitational stability of the physicality of the earth and of the physicality of the man space, right? So we are inherently peaceful. These are our dreams. That's why we came here. And earth space, the landscape of the earth space is heaven. And so our dreamscape for the man space is peace. That's how we determine the emotional position. This is our inner space, dream space. And we've seen it because some can produce the cup of life, some can produce the cups of man, and some can't. And they have to take into account the earth space. And that from there, you have the inertial space. And that allows a place for the souls. Each cup has a magnetical gravitational field force interacting in a home for the soul. And collectively, all 5 cups come together magnetically and gravitationally in a home for the soul. And they act as one, because this is where science of the soul of man meets for peace. And it has to take into account more. It has to take into account all the elements of the universe, all the elements of the solar system, and all of the independent variables of the humanity family. So we are now at the point where after December the 16th of 2022, we can all make better and more skillful choices so that we can find this graceful inner space between the outer space, the transmutation space, and the earth space, which is that bountiful space that we've all chosen different types of spaceships to come. And so here we are with our dream ship, which will allow us to have this transmutation dream space. "509 weeks in a row, we have presented the Knowledge Seekers Workshop to bring together this greater oneness and transcend the limitations of nuclear science. To understand the difference between the physical matter and the plasmatic matter, and to understand that relationship. So why we can sense the plasmatic and we can do different rates of sensitivity. We have to understand this. We have to understand the difference between earth space and man space and how they interact, and the dynamic plasma field forces that interact in between, and how we're constituted to bring the 3 amigos together, because what we're looking for is world peace. And so when we look at the calendar, we see this pivotal moment prior to November the 11th, where the KAKT plasma science will be put forward in exchange for peace. And this is a token of our appreciation, because we're moving from the materialization science. So yes, it's a new space age, but this is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings of Plasma Science. We're welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers. Life's learning lessons transmute your dreamscape to your preference and sentimentality. So you better make the right choices. And the World Peace Treaty is the universal choice. So sign it with a pen, with your heart, with your soul, and sign it with sincerity, because that is a true reflection of the dilution of emotion, which allows fields of life choices to be free from boundaries or abuse. It's your ethos is your GPS position on the peace roadmap, and the universal community is your travel guide. The speed of love manifests and determines your inner space emotional constructs. The earthbound soul family seeks physical and emotional gravitational stability and vitality. The emotion of knowledge is embodied in the transmutation connection, and this connection connects equally to the universal cosmic rays freedom broadcast channel. This channel is the channel of inner space. Your inner space dreamscape resonates with the proper plasma universe. So this is why the plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new outer space age. And that's the end of this flight. I hope you enjoyed the trip. And thank you all for allowing me to present.
Oh, very, very nice, Alex. Again, I think each one of these slides could probably be opened up for a day, a week, a month, a year, depending on our depth of knowledge. But you probably touched on things that went over our head, and maybe we understood a little bit more. And that's the whole idea of just layering on more knowledge after more knowledge. And this is an endless process. So we're very happy and delighted that you can share more. You might have even touched on, as you have before, things that you weren't even aware of.
Oh, precisely.
Mr. Kesh had mentioned that about one of your teachings when he came in. He said you touched on something very interesting and you might not have been aware of what you touched on. We never found out what that was, but again, there's so much knowledge to be shared and to be understood.
Well, wait. You're jumping to conclusions. This is, we touched on the dreamscape. That's what we did. And going back to what's happening in November the 24th is intimately tied into that. We are embarking on the transmutation process and the understanding of it.
So it was the dreamscape that you touched, you feel?
Oh, definitely. Yes. But, by the same token, I can't say that I understood it completely, but I had to revisit it because there was a change in the pattern. You see, the dreamscape is a manifestation of our inner space, and our inner space has to take into account the inner space of our environment. How do you determine that, or how do you predetermine that? This is a skill set that we have to learn.
Right, and slowly, we're being brought into it more and more. And that 24th of November will be another important step in getting to the next step. I don't think we're going to run out of steps. We may run out of breath.
We're definitely going to be doing that. Yeah. Well, it ain't going to be the same. I tell you that for sure. But safety is the fundamental method, or safety is the fundamental connection. If you're in a safe place, or if you're in a peaceful place, then you can go into a deep sleep. If you have to move, you want to move with safety. If lack of safety may cause you to move, but going towards safety is always attractive. And this is a fundamental point. And I personally have been practicing that. And it's one of the reasons that I don't have any problem going to sleep, because I always look for a place of safety. and I just do this automatically. And you find that that's, even in wartime, like soldiers are amazed, how you can have bombs exploding all around you and yet you're still sleeping. And you need to sleep, and you say, well, you're a soldier in the battlefield. How can you take time out from sleeping because you may not wake up? And that part is true, but some do and some don't. So that is the transmutation connection, isn't it? And we really haven't had the opportunity to explain that because we're too busy fighting. We're all making bad choices. So we have to start making the good choice. And we'll say, when we look at our family, we'll say, oh, you're my son and you're my stepson, and my son is going to get more love than my stepson. Well, there's no rule that says that your son is, because of by way of being a biological family, has precedence over your stepson, who is your, how shall we say it, the soup du jour. But the thing is that all are equal. So the choice of the family is incidental. So our humanity family and our Earth space family is the choice that we've made today.
Right. And how do you oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, how long does that last and what causes the change? But go ahead with your question.
No, I was going to say, I know it was mentioned that your true children come out of your soul in a future time. So again, we're very attached to the children, and they seem to be from us, but he had indicated at one point that your true children come out of your soul in a future time. So that's another long, interesting, pondering question. Let's open up the floor. Maybe you'd like to address that. But why don't we, in the meantime, hopefully someone has a thought, a question, would like to take an exception to what the teacher has taught. This is the University of the Universe, where you are allowed to talk back to the teacher. So don't feel bashful or shy, because we're all, as we read in the beginning of this workshop, we're all infants in this knowledge. And that should give you quite a thought of humbleness, as he said, whether you've been around 1,000 years or 10,000 years. We're all infants, and I don't think I've made the 1,000-year mark yet. So what about your true children, Alex?
Well, that's a really good question, you see, because in order to know my true children, I think I would have to know my true family. And in order to know my true family, I think I'd have to know my true soul. Which is to say, we know that the plasma science works because we were born. And we know that the Earth space was our landing point. What we don't know is what was our launch point. We're preoccupied with the Earth space being our launch point, and we want to go somewhere where, so someone says, oh, well, we're going to go to the moon or we're going to go to Mars. Well, on what basis do you make that decision? And may I ask you, are those the only two choices? It's a multiple choice. What's a multiple of two? Maybe we want to go to and pick a name, just look out into the universe, you just pick a name, says, well, why can't we go there? Oh, well, we have limitations, you know. Well, is it possible that that place where you've picked out and you say, well, I don't know why I picked that, I just picked it random. Is it really random? Is it possible that maybe that was a reference to your launch point? Maybe that was a direction that was pointing towards your home? Is that what you wanted to do? You wanted to go home? So if we're going to go somewhere, wouldn't that be a good place to go? Because shouldn't that be a place of safety? Unless your home is destroyed, right? If your home is destroyed, but you don't want to go there. So you want to go to another place of safety. So that point being, wherever you go to a place of safety, that becomes your home. So when you look at the proposition that Mr. Kesh has put with respect to those in Gaza, do they want to leave or do they refuse to leave? Or are they not allowed to leave? And I think we could say yes to all three of those questions, or all three of those answers in the multiple choice. We could say yes, but on what basis? And, you know, when you're in warm and fuzzy, comfy, you don't want to leave. But, you know, what happens when you're in a desolate place surrounded by death and destruction? Yeah, you want to leave. So why aren't you leaving? Well, maybe then that's the third answer. You can't leave. So I found it a very unique suggestion where Iran has been asked to provide a home of safety. And Mr. Kesh and the Kesh Foundation has offered to provide food security. Now what you have is gravitational stability.
Right, and medication. So I think that would be one of the largest demonstrations of the technology that's ever happened. I know we get a number of people, tens of people into the monthly sessions, but this would be 1.5 million people simultaneously just listening to headphones for their food and medication. And you say those in Gaza can't leave. Well, what about the citizens in Israel as well? Are there any exit visas being granted? I think probably the soul is sort of feeling what's about to happen or could happen. Hopefully it'll be averted for souls on both ends of the conflict in a way.
I'm not putting forward one answer. What I'm saying is some want to go, some don't want to go, and some aren't allowed to go. And, you know, so it won't be, you know, wholesale, you know, mass evacuation, because some are so attached to their physicality that, you know, the only satisfaction they will get is if they are buried in that particular place. That's the kind of extremism that is prevalent. But what I'm saying is, if you have choices, now you're given a choice. You can stay, you can go, or you know, if you're not allowed to go, that is a choice that you're not making, that someone else is making on your behalf. But if you're given the opportunity to go, well, That's not solely the decision of those who are there. That has to involve others. So one is the destination, if it's Iran, and it has to involve the other nations. So this all appeals to the inner space of all those. And what they have to understand is that they are all part of the inner space of the family, humanity family. They're all part of the inner space of the humanity family. And regardless of wherever they are, that is all part of the inner space of the soul of the earth body. So it doesn't matter where you're at. What matters is to be in safety and in peace.
And that's the beauty of the transmutation, that you will be able to change your map location. If you don't feel you've been treated fairly, if you're not happy with the conditions in your environment, once it's taught, people will be able to change and move, almost like a free will. Wishing to be there, you could be there. At least that's what we heard as well with the corona, when it was trying to gain that aspect of physicality or come into the physicality. Mr. Kesh said there are planets that had to be abandoned. We've seen this not often, but until things got back into shape in 100, 200, 3 centuries or whatever, and then people could go back when things sort of quieted down. So
I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, good.
Okay, because that would have happened if there was a disruption to the communication. The disruption of the communication is an in-between manifestation. So it becomes an inertia manifestation of a different kind. But it does not negate it. No, it doesn't dissolve the inertia field of the original field strength, because the original field strength is true. In other words, your soul is true, and the truth of your soul interacts with the truth of the earth soul. And so the soul of your body is manifested from a point of truth. It's the physicality which changes from the point of a disruption. But it doesn't eliminate the truth of the soul of the man and the truth of the soul of the earth. This is the point that I'm trying to say. So if we have abandoned places, as Mr. Kesh has suggested, and we were forced to do that, with this new technology, we could go back and undo that damage by patching in to the truth of the original field forces. Let me extend this back to our original example. If those who are trapped in Gaza have the capability to move and move to safety, it does not prevent them from returning sometime in the future, if they so wish. But at that point, they would have to be returning to a point of safety, because they're not going to leave a place of safety to go to a place of danger. So the attachment that they may have still remains, but the detachment is necessary to ensure the safety and to bring peace, with the comfort of knowing that it can be reattached at a later date if they so wish. But given that those are the choices that they have, then that's maybe what they choose to do. So we have now an opportunity to have different choices. So from the point of safety, if they actually were to leave Gaza and go to Iran, they would now have a different point of view. And so the attachment that they have to go back to Gaza may not be as strong as what it is at this point in time, because that attachment is obviously very, very strong, because it is not a very welcome place to begin with, but the attachment overcomes that. So this is how strong that is. And so in a mature way, they have to make this choice, because they haven't had this choice. So present the choice and see what the result will be. But don't appeal to the physicality. Don't say, oh, this place is a shambles, you have to leave. Appeal to the inner space, sense of safety and peace, and understand that we have to elevate our energy fields to a playing field where peace is the ruler. You cannot elevate as a warmonger. Cannot be done. Shall we say it's physically impossible? So that's a welcome.
Okay, are there others who'd like to share something, a point of view? I think we saw quite a bit today, heard quite a bit. Hopefully, we've all understood a little bit more about this great knowledge seeking and the depth of it, and how it can just continue to go deeper and deeper in every.
Well, I think everybody.
Yes.
I think everybody on the panel understands how serious this is, and also understands the responsibility that they have, because by nearness and proximity, they are the, voluntold. They're not volunteers, they're voluntold by their soul. Now this is where they have to be, and this is what we have to do. So all of us have this inherent responsibility and the awareness that we have it. And so we're just honing our skills on how to present, because on the one hand, we could say, this is a bigger hill to climb than Mount Everest, but it's not. We will have the skills and the technology to assist us in doing this. And so we have to have the trust, and the faith, and it's well deserved, because when we look at the Earth space and we see how it was created, and we look at the humanity family and how we were created, that immediately deserves respect, and that respect is well earned. So this is a skill that we can adopt and adapt to, and this is probably the number one thing that's on my mind, is after November the 12th, this is going to be a different planet. And I don't know how I'm going to react to that, but I can tell you that fundamentally, I'm confident that it will be in safety and in peace. So I want to thank everybody for allowing me to continue to present.
Why is November 12th, Alex?
Hi.
Hi. Why it is November 12th, the change? And what kinds of change do you think?
The conference, the Ambassadors Conference in London, is one of the most significant events on this planet. Things will change. It's guaranteed.
I think she was saying, what is the significance of the 12? The number 12. Is that right, Selena?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
1 and 2 equals 3.
Yeah, this is true. And also, November is the 9th month, isn't it? And so, we're going to have a real 9/11 there.
Well, the
11th,
11th,
the day
I
after.
think it's the 11th month. And that's
No,
Armistice.
November.
November is
9.
the 11th month, right?
So September is 7,
Yeah.
October is 8, November is 9, December is 10.
What happened to 12 months?
Well,
I think
we have
12, or are we on a different calendar?
Okay. Well, it's because of July and August, right? They messed everything up.
Okay, no problem. No, I always considered, but it was the 11th day of the 11th month. And this is the Armistice Day, I think Mr. Kesh mentioned, where we remember those who were died in these wars from earlier previous conflicts, and that the King of England would then put a flower in a certain position, I think. And this is where we see in this country, and I always wondered why people wore poppies on that day, and I sort of looked it up, and the veterans used to hand out poppies on that day, and that was the first flower that arose from the blood-soaked fields of, was it northern France and that area?
In Flanders Fields.
That's why the poppy is a symbol of that remembrance, because it was the first to pop up in a way.
In Flanders Fields, where the poppies grow.
Afghanistan.
The significance of 12, of course, is that there are 12 signs of the zodiac. So we are, what goes around comes around.
Yesterday I had a, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yesterday I had a, thank you. I had a different kinds of experience. I will share a little bit later. Go ahead now.
Oh no, please go share.
It will take time, little bit. Yesterday, Saturday, we had Bangla teaching. So Mushfiq and we are talking about Mushfiq talking about the flying car and those kinds of stuff. So the one time that we talk about the spaceship, I told before about my experience, the spaceship experience. So that talk. So after that, I had my uncle was died in last Thursdays, so I had little bit different type of feelings in my mind. I was sad whole day, and then nighttime I went to sleep early yesterday. So 1 a.m. I woke up, and I didn't try to go to bed, sleep again. So I was in meditation, and then I listened one guided meditation. So after that, I put up my phone and headphone, everything, and then I was in meditation. Meditation exactly not. I just white sitting on the bed, and then suddenly I felt there is bubble, big bubble. I'm in my room, in the bed. I hear everything is happening outside or something. And my husband one time woke up and he went to the bathroom and come back. So I heard everything, but my eyes was closed. And then I felt it is big bubble, and I'm seeing the space, and I think so I'm inside a big spaceship. And then I'm listening everything outside, what is happening. My every noise I'm listening, but I don't know. It's like I'm in the bubble. I'm other side, other world too. Two world I'm living together. And then there's spaceship. I think so. Big spaceship. I'm seeing everything open. In the spaceship, when people in the movie and the other stuff, this show us that there is a tunnel or something, wormhole, black hole, whatever it is happening, and the spaceship going inside. No, I didn't see that. It was totally open. I'm seeing everything in the sky. It was totally different experience, and I was navigating the spaceship. I think so. I was standing there, and I'm seeing the front side. It's like a dome, glass dome. What is? I forgot his name. The Mexican guy who make the dome. Those kinds of glass, like glass dome in the front. I can see everything. Big screen, and then
You-
over there.
You
Yeah.
mean Gianni?
Yes, Gianni. Right. Thank you. And then there is the screen is not totally black, grayish and blackish together. If you melt together, then there is a color, right? That color and that color, there was a silverish white geometry is happening, changing. Every moment is changing the geometry screen, and then I'm watching that. I'm very cool and then very peaceful. I felt when I'm navigating, I was very peaceful, but I'm doing very critical work. Every moment is important. I'm doing, and then I felt there was other people in my back, other side. I'm feeling them, and then right side I saw one person little bit back of my right side. I'm not gonna tell who what kinds of people is that. And then he's helping me too. But he is not it is helping me. So there is really a strange experience. I can't explain what just happened that yesterday. And I don't know why I say those kinds of stuff, because of we are talking about a spaceship, or because I was sad, or in the meditation, whatever it is, it's happened. So I want to share. That's why I share. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Okay, anyone else would like to come in and pose a question, make a comment, share something you've understood or are thinking about? It's no problem. As we said, we're all infants in this knowledge, playing in a way in the nursery. You know, Mr. Kesh had mentioned a few workshops ago about this being a nursery for souls. And he said, unfortunately, this is not the only nursery in the universe. I was thinking of asking him, are there any nurseries in the universe that got it right? Or perhaps the universal community, as they leave fields in a certain place and others leave fields in the same place, and then a soul forms out of that. Maybe those are sort of small individual nurseries in a way. But are there any nurseries, Alex, in the universe that got it right the first time?
Well, you're asking me as if I'm an expert. So all I can give you is my opinion. And you know, when you look at the majority of the universe, it's actually quite perfect. So the difference for people when, let's say, they're in the city, and it's, you know, a busy, bustling community, and then you go to the country, and they find that it's very peaceful and very desirable, and it becomes that way because of the difference. If you're in a peaceful environment, it may be not fully appreciated because you can't tell that you're in a peaceful environment. It's just a normal environment. So it's when you're in an abnormal, you know, the dysfunctional environment, they say, "Oh man, would it ever be nice to be in a peaceful environment?" And then you look around the universe and you see, well, nothing in the universe would have been created if it was other than peaceful. So where it's not peaceful is an exception, because really that's the reason that we came here. Now this what he said on Thursday was very simply this: that when you actually you did it at the beginning today, you talked about the seed plant. So the seed plant is actually the weakest point, and it draws energy. It actually attracts the energy because the seed is the weakest, right? So the strongest feeds the weakest. That's what the problem is with the earth. The earth is in a very weak position. That's why we've all come here.
Right. Well, I wonder if the creator has the ability to cancel his remodeling contract.
Not until we
He's moving whole galaxies. Stars are going to change positions. We don't really understand it, but he said in the future we'll have time to see, we'll have time to understand what this whole remodeling that's going on in a way in the background, and we're much closer that all the created things will be able to transit between the two dimensions, and this has never happened before. So there is quite a huge remodeling project, I think, going on in the universe, sort of out of our purview or our vision to see exactly, but apparently a lot of atoms are turning, and we're much closer than anyone could imagine, he said, even those in the universal community.
Well, if I may paraphrase that,
sure.
Say we have to transmute our dreamscape into our physical landscape.
Right, and there was a lot mentioned about calcium in this workshop. I think he went from about minute 37 to minute 57, just discussing. I know he said following the corona that we would do a very deep dive into more understanding this virus, this calcium, and so on and so forth. It said he had a lot to teach us in a way. And it
Well,
looks like
yes.
it's part of the wellness, the health wellness, the transmutation. I think he mentioned calcium about 45 times in this workshop. So there's a lot there. We didn't get to cover it today, but maybe in the future we'll cover it more.
Actually, I did. We were talking about mother's milk, and mother's milk has 17% calcium. And interestingly enough, there was a gentleman who was providing something called coral calcium. And why he was touting it was because it had 56% soluble calcium. And so he was comparing his product as being superior to mother's milk. And I thought, it's kind of an interesting advertisement, oh, well, we're 3 times, more beneficial than mother's milk. Well, no, that's, you're just a legend in your own mind. The reason it's 17% is because all things work in combination. So if you want to understand, look at the extreme. And if, your product was 100% calcium, well, you wouldn't be able to do anything with it. So, and if it was no calcium, well, that's the other extreme. So the mother's milk was at 17%, and that is what is necessary. Now, in fairness to the women in the audience, I don't think that they have this dial where they can dial in the amount of calcium they have in the mother's milk. So where does that knowledge come from? Right? So this is the emotion of knowledge. This is what I'm saying. So is it less, or is it less of excess? So in other words, it's fine you have 56%, but you only need 17%. So, the rest is a waste. You're just putting too much. So this becomes the fundamental point in our understanding. When we say Mother Nature, it understands what we need better than anybody. But the thing is, when we start to pick and choose, when we look at the periodic table of elements, if we understand that our Earth space is part of our family, then the elements that are manifest on the Earth space are likewise essential for our survival. That's what constitutes our amalgamation of our inner space with the Earth space inner space. And I was just shocked when he mentioned that on Thursday, because it's a key point. And if you look at calcium and the problems of calcium, we have liquid calcium, we have cartilage in the calcium, we have bone structure in the calcium. So, and soluble and insoluble. And science has been grappling with that forever. And so the plasma science is demonstrating how it works. So what we're looking at is at the inertia field. What we have to tune into is that guiding hand in the back, that 1 + 1. How was that created? Because each one of those is an inertia field. So one inertia field plus another inertia field creates another different inertia field. and you don't lose the first two, because you have to have the first two to maintain the third. You cannot forfeit. If you forfeit the one, then all three disappear, because now you've created a weakness. And so either it becomes contributed to gravitationally, or it becomes depleted. And so that all depends on the susceptibility of the magnetical gravitational field forces. It's so sweet the way it comes together. So back to you, Mark.
Yes, I had always heard that calcium is important for strong bones and strong teeth, but I think there's way, way, way more to it than just that. And this deep dive into calcium that we may go into.
Yeah, you know how people have sensitive teeth?
Yes.
Or osteoporosis?
Yes.
That is the dissolving of the calcium that has been manifest or materialized in those spaces. So that calcium is being dissolved by an acidic condition. But the bone remains, the tooth remains. It's just that they're more porous. That's what osteoporosis is, the porosity of the bone. Yeah. Well, so that means the rest of the bone is not calcium. Right? You understand?
No.
When you look at a clamshell, no, what I'm saying is that calcium on its own is not strong enough. There is a layering, and there's an interaction of those layers. So the calcium is part of the binding force in the bone structure, but it also gives it the flexibility. You know, if your spine is rigid, you know, gymnastics would be a dangerous, you know, exercise, because you'd break like glass. So this sponginess, if you will, this is what gives the bones their tensile strength. It's the reason seniors with osteoporosis break their hips when they fall is because the bones have become brittle. So it's a depletion of the calcium in the bone structure, which has allowed the bones to be brittle. So if the calcium is depleted, what's left behind is not calcium, or it's not calcium in that state. So it's something else. And so when you look at a clamshell and you see the wave pattern on the clamshell, so in between each wave is a layer of calcium. So if you see let's say you have a clamshell, and now this is the residue, and you put it in alkaline water, that clamshell will last. But if you put that clamshell in acidic water, you will find that it'll eventually become porous. And the reason for it is because the calcium will be sacrificed in the process of trying to maintain equilibrium. The calcium will be sacrificed. Calcium will be consumed. So what's left behind is not the calcium. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and again, there's a deep knowledge in here that we haven't hardly opened up in the transmutation. I think he's talking about, well, health and everything, living, what was it, 1,000 years in this workshop? 50, 100, 1,000 years of life. You never eat food, you never get sick, you never feel cold. if we learn how to make that perhaps perfect calcium, and even make it where there is no planet or no dimension right out into the universe. Again, it's quite deep. Let's see, Randy.
It's fundamental for stability. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Maybe you'd like to read what Randy put in the chat?
I can read it.
Oh, sure.
In children
Hi,
and
Randy.
teens, greetings. In children and teens, the body adds more bone than it takes away. Bones gradually become larger, heavier, and denser as children grow. In young, healthy adults, about the same amount of bone are removed and replaced. As adults get older and get certain diseases, remodeling can become unbalanced. More bone can be removed than the amount that is laid down. As a result, bones become weaker and certain bone diseases can develop. And you're totally right about the gymnastics. If it was a solid piece, like a solid piece of steel, we wouldn't even be able to walk.
Yeah, this is why I was talking about the extremes. When you look at the extreme and you say, okay, well, it's 100%, yeah, you wouldn't be able to walk. So there has to be a combination. That's the point. Go ahead, Randy.
And the fluidity is, you know, and the thing I've always asked people, why do you drink cow's milk? What are you doing drinking the milk of another species of animal, thinking it's going to help you? Do you have 4 stomachs? No. Do you have 4 legs? No. Do you eat grass? No. So what's the benefit of drinking something designed for another animal?
It's the gans of the cow. I think it was explained. And as he said, with the vegetarians that avoid eggs and milk and cheese and butter, these are all very important for life. And there was something with that as well, and maybe it has to do with the calcium. But the way the honey is the gans of the bees, the milk is the gans of the cow.
Well,
I know
putting
a lot of adulterating it, but
when they found Tutankhamun's grave, what they didn't tell you was full of honey.
Probably needed it on the long voyage he was about to.
That's right. You need some energy.
Okay. Anyone else want to bring anything else? I know it's midnight in Europe land. Alex, Randy, anyone?
Thank you all for a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Okay, I just thought I'd share this little memento that was given, a little keychain, but it's not the keychain that's important, it's the words that are on it. So may you be proud of the work you do. May you be proud of the person you are. And may you be proud of the difference you make. Thank you. Because we're all bringing this knowledge in so many ways. A little corner of it. Herm?
Yes.
Okay, I saw your mic open. I thought you maybe wanted to say something.
I just said thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to play the Wellness Center, because much of this is going to be delivered through a wellness center in conjunction with headphones, microphones, speakers, and I think the rest of it, as it was alluded to in this last workshop. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you for being and bringing this change to this planet. And as we can see, it's sorely needed, and hopefully we don't have to, or certain countries don't have to go back to the Stone Age so they can advance further. But we'll have to see. Okay, thank you all.